Mindset Athlete podcast, and I'm your host, James Roberts. I'm a two-time Paralympian and owner of James Robert Fitness, which is an online training, nutrition and mindset coaching business. First of all, I'd like to thank Lauren Williams for suggesting this quote to the show. An athlete is a mindset. It's how you prepare, think and execute. Not because of some elite status or physical stature. Anybody can be an athlete. By Chris Hart. And each week on the Mindset Athlete, we like to bring you inspirational athletes, a message, or experts talking about human optimization to teach you how to change your perception of your mindset and become 1% better. I'm coming to you again solo on this week's episode of the Mindset Athlete podcast. And obviously with it being Remembrance Sunday as I'm recording, I thought it poignant to do an episode around that. And it was brought to my attention by AJ Roberts, who I have been on his show not too long ago, but obviously detract from that and obviously come back to the story at hand. Good Morning Britain aired a show not too long ago, about a couple of days ago, if not over a week ago as I'm recording, talking about obviously the contestants of The Apprentice revealed they didn't know when the World War II actually begun. And I think this is actually very worrying and to a certain extent probably disgusting as what people perceive as important or priorities in their life. And if I go a step further, in addition, an Instagram, quote unquote, influencer also appeared on that show. He believed that learning about World War II can have a negative effect on the use of today's mental health. And to a certain extent, I did do a Facebook Live before I came on to actually record this show this evening, where I went into a little bit of detail as to why I think this is. He's got to a certain extent a right to his opinion, but to generalize to say that it's going to have a negative effect on the youth of today's mental health is downright probably to a certain extent. I didn't say he was looking for media attention or looking to get the spotlight shown on him a little bit more than be it on the outside periphery of what is Instagram. But obviously from a Facebook point of view, I didn't say that. But I think within my own show, I would probably agree when people say that. He's trying to make an outlandish comment to be able to get attention. And obviously from a basis of saying it's going to affect a multitude of people, okay, yes, you have a right to your opinion, like I said, and say, yes, it will possibly affect people's mental health because obviously the brutality of war and whatnot. But obviously on the flip side of that, I would argue, and this is probably where I'm coming from with my side of the argument, is I've had mental health issues. I have no problem putting them out in the public for people to be able to get some additional support from it, because obviously if I've been able to come out the other side of the tunnel, so to speak, anybody can do it, or anybody in their right mind can have a mental health issue, and it is to a certain extent okay to not feel ashamed or have that stigma that is associated with it that's been heavily in the past, be it you need to man up and things like that if you're coming from a male perspective. But I'm not saying it's any more difficult for women out there. But I think for me, when he does say things like that, it's going to have a massive impact on people's mental health. It's like, to a certain extent, I would never say history had a bearing on my mental well-being. I wouldn't say necessarily World War II, because I grew up in a militaristic environment where my mother worked for NATO. My grandmother and grandfather fought in World War II, and my family's actual relationship with serving his or her country goes back quite some generations. So I think for me, for when somebody does say things like that, it's kind of a slap in the face to me, but also the countless hundreds and thousands of other families that have obviously lost a loved one due to war, because you're thinking, well, you're a bit selfish to say that it's going to happen to affect your mental health. Well, you're still at home. You have the luxury of having your freedoms and a voice to be able to say those types of opinions, because obviously if it hadn't come down to people willing to necessarily come out of their comfort zone, be it they didn't sign up to go to war, be it the First World War or the Second World War, they did it because they saw it was right to stand up for something that they believed in, and people believed that in freedom. So obviously in terms of that, I was probably very closely associated with growing up very much around, I'm trying to think which World War would it have been. I think it's, off the top of my head, the end of the Battle of Mons, because that's where I'd grown up, be it for the first 19 years of my life. So I'm closely associated with obviously what happened, and I think to a certain extent, if we're not too careful, and I don't want to get too political in terms of this show, because I did to a certain extent when I did the Facebook Live, if we don't learn from past mistakes, we're ever going to do them again. And I think to a certain extent, when people have questioned my beliefs on, obviously, practice makes improvements, and people look to say, oh, you should strive to attain perfection. I think within, obviously, this episode, I would agree with that message more than, obviously, practice makes improvement, because that a lesser degree would probably orientate itself to be towards fitness, nutrition, and to a certain extent mindset, but obviously trying to attain perfection and actually learning from your mistakes, you're better served obviously employing the latter than the former, because obviously we don't want to see World War III, we don't want to see thousands of lives lost like what was the case in World War I or World War II. But if people are not willing to learn about the past, how are we ever going to be able to make that not a reality? Because if you don't learn from, be it, that's not, I'm not saying by any certain terms that World War One, World War Two, if you go further back with different conflicts within wherever, what nation you come from, is to a certain extent nothing to be learnt from. We're on a hiding to nothing in terms of, it does come down to, and I think this is in a nutshell, people's priorities, be it the social influencer. I'll probably throw him under the bus now to a certain extent, because it's my opinion, it's my show. His priorities are by, first impression, and actually looking at him firsthand. I didn't see the interview, but be it from the picture, you get a certain impression of somebody. The priorities are probably looking to, he's in his 20s, it's very much looking to please other people. It's very much looking to get appeasal from other people. Your appearance is more important to get that admiration of other people. And I'm not saying I wasn't any different in my 20s, because I sure as hell wasn't, because I probably did the exact same things, not to the degree of, I won't say attention seeking, but that is what it is, in terms of trying to do that, because I probably did it on a different stage because I had sport. I didn't have to seek the attention. The media spotlight was there, not necessarily when I wanted it to be, but if I bring back the question that was asked not too long after the I won't call it termination, the ending of the Paralympic Games in 2008 in Beijing. How do you feel when obviously football, rugby, and cricket are in the spotlight predominantly more of the time? I obviously said that when you're an Olympic or Paralympic athlete, you kind of come to accept that. But obviously, when you have your 2 weeks, 3 weeks in the spotlight, that's your time to shine. That's your time to make every effort to be able to, I'll call it leverage, but it's not really leverage. Be able to get the utmost that you can from that momentary media gaze on towards you. But I think because of the simplistic nature that social media allows, be it Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, allowing you to be able to voice your opinion at a moment's notice, obviously things like this are going to become more ever present and be the more, so to speak, important things in probably a person's life become secondary. But obviously this does come down to unnecessarily an awareness of, be it, you might even not be, and this person may be the same. They might not have that awareness to think, well, this is how I'm being channeled in towards certain aspects, certain habits and certain behaviors, and I'm not going to heed the consequences. Whereas I would like to think that I would utilize Facebook, Instagram, and to a certain extent this show in the right manner. Obviously, if I took any backlash for an opinion that I obviously put out there, I have to take those consequences and be able to have we'll call it a stiff upper lip, which Brits are renowned for, or to a certain extent a strong chin to be able to take those, what in a sense is probably criticism. Some of it might be pointed in the right direction because it's obviously what's the word I'm looking for? Critical feedback, but that's not the right word I'm looking for. But I use the scientific way of doing it because obviously it's looking to make you better. But I think in a nutshell, and I will come to my conclusion with this episode to not make it too long and long-winded. I think we need to be careful of losing sight of obviously what's important, because I think this day does remind us that generation are becoming few and far between. But if we don't come to ask these questions of not necessarily how did it make them feel, etc., because most individuals, like I even said on the Facebook Live, are going to be a closed shop. It's certain aspects of their subconscious they don't want to deal with because of obviously those traumatic, life-threatening things that they were. Some people probably were into their lives of obviously dying. So, and they're seeing their friends drop down beside them. So, be it, I can't even comprehend, be it, past military men and women, current servicemen having to fight in a war zone, because obviously if you're not thrust into that environment firsthand, I think mentally you can never understand or mentally comprehend what they're having to deal with when they come back. Be it, probably they can endure if they lost a limb or something like that, because that is, to a certain extent, you could call it mental fortitude, overcoming adversity, because you've come to accept this is your new reality and your new identity. You're going to move forward. But I think when it comes to the mental aspect of things, that is a beast in itself. It's very much a labyrinth. And because obviously we are told never to obviously stay in our mind, because it's a very much one of those things that can get the better of ourselves. But I think if we don't talk about things like this, they're going to be lost, and it's going to be, to a certain extent, you think of like old civilizations, they died out. If we don't adapt and we don't evolve, we're going to be in the same predicament, because obviously if we don't ask the past generation what could we do better going forward before it's too late, inevitably we will reenact some of those things that happened between 70 and 90 years ago. I know it's morbid, it's one of those things that people probably don't want to having to listen to, but it's probably fact, because like I said, if those priorities are not in the right place, we're going to start making silly decisions. If you like this episode, please do share it with your friends, and do let me know what you thought of the episode by tagging me over on Instagram at JamesORoberts11, and again you can do the same on Twitter and Facebook. And if you had any questions, don't hesitate to shoot them over as well. And as always, do check out my free content at fitamputee.co.uk and click on the tab Free Resources. But not forgetting, I've also started a new Facebook group, especially for the podcast, which you can find by typing The Mindset Athlete. So make sure to check that link out. It will be in the description. You can find all the show notes at mindsetgame.lipsum.com under the category General. So once again, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next week for another episode of the Mindset Athlete podcast.